Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am AA Ron, and this is the Inclusive Dad Podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, rate, or review the show on your favorite platform. We truly appreciate your feedback and would be honored if you shared the podcast with friends and family who might benefit. Today, my guest is Kayla Coburn. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did. I
Awesome.
loved AA Ron.
Thanks. You've seen the skit?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Kayla. I used to be I started as like a paraprofessional in the classroom, went to special education teacher, and then worked in the deafblind field as an education specialist and independent living teacher. And I did that all in California. And then my family and I decided to move. And when we came to Washington, my jobs couldn't come with me. And I had two small kids, so I was like, I'm just gonna try the like not working thing. And after like 4 months, I'm like, I'm just gonna start my own small business. That's probably easy. It's not, it does take a lot of work,
Right.
but I've just super been loving it. So it's called Inclusion Starts Now. And now I've been supporting teams and families with inclusion at their school sites. And then I've written a couple children's books. And my third one just got here today.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
real
Congra-
exciting stuff.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What is your definition of inclusion?
So, my definition of inclusion is when people feel like they can be a part of their chosen community, and just really being able to have access to where they want to be, instead of people telling them where they should be.
I love that.
So,
Is that
thank you.
has that always been your definition, or has it changed over time?
So I think I was getting interviewed for something where they told me that that was going to be a question, and it was interesting because at that point I was like, I don't think I've ever really thought of a definition other than like inclusion is to be included,
Right.
and it kind of just got me thinking about like what it really means because it looks so different for everybody.
Right.
Um, like for me to be included, like I include myself in everything, every possible group or organization or friend that I am like an extreme extrovert and it's very
Okay.
overwhelming for people. But like some people, their their idea of being included is like, maybe like hanging out with a couple of good friends that they have and like, every couple of days like having an organization to go to or something. Like so it really just depends on what the person wants, but I do think a lot of like education goes into that for like the teachers and the parents to like give all the opportunities for the children to like learn of like, where do you want to be included?
Sure.
Um, and explore all that.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I'm not sure how much you know about my story, but my story is I didn't growing up. I don't. If I look back, I don't remember any talk about disability, any knowing anybody where that had a disability or where we talked about it at least. Don't remember wheelchairs, see anybody in wheelchairs, any of that stuff. Fast forward, my son was born in 2001, actually 2 months to the day before 9/11. 15 months later, my daughter was born. At 3 months old, we found out she was having seizures, so diagnosed with epilepsy. Subsequently, cerebral palsy. She'll be 22 in October. She uses a wheelchair to get around. She's gonna age out of the school transition program here in Minnesota on her 22nd birthday. But since I didn't know anything about disability or special education, when she was born, obviously it's like, what is this? There's this parallel universe out there that I
Yeah.
apparently exists that I didn't even know about. So had to learn all that stuff kind of on my own. And then because she has, when she qualifies for special ed, she qualifies as severely multiply impaired, I think they call it in
Yeah.
Minnesota at least. So multiple categories. Since I didn't know anything about it, the school said that she should go to this program for her, which ended up being taking the special ed bus across town. Not to a school different than her neighborhood school, being in a separate classroom. And early on in that journey, I don't remember exact age, but went to visit her at lunch, saw other kids in the room folding towels at first, second grade, and I was like, that seems weird to me. Why are they not in math class or reading class
Yeah.
this early, in the school career? So found out about inclusion at some point, and then struggled to get her back included because it seemed like once she was out of the general ed setting, like trying to get her back in,
Yes.
now there's more hoops to jump through than before, which didn't
Yeah.
make any sense to me. So just a lot of those issues for me, and the inclusion. The other thing that we kind of ran into here is we live in a town of roughly 25,000 people. There are small districts, 15, 20 minutes away, but it never really was an option for us to have her go somewhere else. So we're here in this place. Um, Me, the special ed director, used to be her case manager early on when she was in school. So we known her forever, get along great. Just that, this district's kind of definition of inclusion or what they see it as and my definition are not the same. So we kind of have that. When I'm
Yeah.
talking about it, it's full inclusion. Have her be as much as included as possible. Them as they talk about opportunities for inclusion, and I'm like, we're like on two separate planets right now. Like we're not talking about the same
Yeah.
stuff. So a lot of my struggle resolves around that. So I'm really excited for you to be on today. I listened to a podcast you were on. I don't even remember who it was about at this point. I should have looked that up. But you were talking, I think it was with a teacher, and you were talking about how to, get more inclusion for kids. And I know you had talked about where you were like in one district and doing certain things to get kids more included. Went into a new school district, and it was didn't go as well. As am I even
Yeah.
remotely talking about the story correctly?
Yeah, that is
Okay.
definitely correct. Um, I mean, I have so much to say even off of your whole story because I definitely, I mean, like having a kid just in general is crazy hard. I
Right.
mean, the transition of becoming a parent is just insane. And,
Exactly.
so many
Yep.
people, even having a child without a disability, so many people are like, no one ever told me how hard this would be.
Yes.
And it's just because, like, you don't know until you have a kid. And then
Exactly.
you're like,
Yep.
oh, yeah, yeah, this is hard. I'm tired. But then having a child with a disability is like you are now fighting against like an ableist medical system, an ableist educational system, and then for a lot of families who don't experience like have someone with a disability in their family, now you're dealing with a bunch of kids like, hey, why do they use a wheelchair? Why do they
Right.
do this? Like all these questions that you're like, not only are you just trying to give your child a life of like,
Yep.
let's go to the playground, let's go do this, like you are now trying to juggle all the different appointments and all these new words and like
Right.
just all these things that like pile up and as a teacher I was very much of like, I chose to be in this field. Like, I chose to specialize in this. And I know that most parents who have a child with a disability did not. Like, they did not
Right.
go to school for years to learn how to work with children with disabilities. So, that was definitely my mindset as a teacher. The first school I was at, they were very much on board. I mean, there was still some teachers that I really had to like build up our trusted relationships so they
Sure.
like trusted me that I wasn't just like giving them more students without the proper support. But the next school, and I mean what I definitely was in the wrong that I was like, I know how to do this, you guys, like, I was pushing and I
Yep.
should have listened to them that they weren't ready and I should
Yeah.
have gone in a little slower and not so hot. But we had a lot of problems because I like wanted to take all my students to a school dance or just like offer it. I wanted to tell all the parents that like, I will be at the school dance, a para of mine will be at the school dance, like we will be there. And when I told this to one of the principals, they were saying that unless all of their parents come, they can't come. So they all had to have like one-on-one supervision. And I was like, and I heard them and I was like, okay, like, and I told the parents, I'm like, if you want to come, you're more than welcome to chaperone. If you don't, I'll be there. Um, anyways, I did not get asked to come back at that school, but looking back at it, like I didn't listen to what they were comfortable with.
Right.
But I was just too gung ho. I'm like, no, inclusion, this is it. And the
Yeah.
school dance was great. All the students had so much fun. They talked about it for like the next 2 or 3 weeks. Like they had a
Right.
blast. So no regrets.
Yeah. That's the story I was remembering. I just didn't remember the exact story because I mean I've had oh man I don't know. Let's see. I think I was got my background check done. So if she would have wanted to go to a dance, I could have gone and been like a volunteer and been there with her. I mean, there's more than one concert I remember where they weren't able to have a pair there. So then I was the one, bringing her, making sure she got onto the stage and stuff, walking in front of everybody, which is not my preference. But I mean, for her to be included, be able to participate, I mean, I just did it. But I mean, I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. It's like, why do none of the other kids have to have their parents there to supervise them, but these kids do, kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, that's interesting. I got so many questions for you. So in my situation where the administration kind of has a completely no has a different view of inclusion than me, the parent, does. Do you have any suggestions on things a parent can do to at least move the needle more towards inclusion in that situation, or some tips for parents?
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's usually trying to figure out like where their concerns are is a really big, because I know like the parents that come in and they're like with a lawyer and with an advocate and they're
Right.
like, just going in really hard. I feel like a lot of schools don't want to be as accommodating, which like I don't think that's good at all. But I feel like when parents come in and they're like also trying to understand where the school's biases are, or like the
Yep.
people on the team, that's like a really good place to start because everyone's like in a different journey with
Right.
like like wherever their ableism is. Um, because like I mean it's really been like the last 30 years. I mean like ADA, the American Disabilities Act, that was signed in 1990. Like
Yes. Yep.
that is 33, 34 years old now. Like
Yep.
that's not that long. Where like, people before that with disabilities were like sadly just institutionalized. They were not
Right.
expected to go to school. So there's a lot of like ableism that we have to push through and like educate people. So I feel like that's a really big one. I've heard parents who have gone in and done kind of like ability awareness activities in their IEP meetings where like this one family wrote, they like translated a paragraph in German or Chinese, like a language that they knew the team wouldn't know, like it wasn't English or
Sure.
Spanish.
Yep.
And they gave it to the team and like told them to read it and then like asked them questions about it. And they were basically trying to explain how like their daughter's brain works, being like, she knows sign language. She does not
Sure.
know if you're just going to talk to her without sign language, you're like she's
Yep.
missing so much information. So they did things like that like educated them. My three steps that I used to always tell people was befriending, educating, and then getting involved.
Okay.
So like I mean, because it's like if someone tells you like I don't want to do this and then you yell at them all the facts, they're not going to be like, oh, you're right, what was I thinking, like I'm going to
Yep.
do that. Like
For sure.
but it does feel a little like sneaky that you're like, okay,
Right.
fine, I'm just going to have to be best friends with you and then you're going to want to do this. And you
Right.
don't always have time when you have like an IEP that's only once a year and you're,
Yeah.
a parent, you're not on campus. So
For sure.
I don't know if that was helpful, but
No, that's helpful. I mean, I know what you're saying, but as a parent, I mean, when your kid, you go to the doctor. I mean, she could be doing PT, OT. Then you got school, you got doctor appointments. There's just like so many things. So for me,
yeah,
I can only speak for myself, but for me, it was like this is the law. Like we should be doing this, and I am kind of where I don't like playing games. Like I'm just gonna straight up tell
yeah,
you, I don't like dancing around it, like doing this dance to get it something. So for me, that was kind of a struggle. I'm just like, this is what it is. We should do it. But then you find out soon in that process, like just because you read it this way does not mean they're gonna agree with you. So then you're like, okay,
Yeah.
that strategy doesn't work, so I have to. But then, it gets to a point as a parent, you're like, you've asked for it, you've played nice, and then, at some point you're like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm
You
done.
get fed
Like I'm
up.
done.
It's yeah.
We've tried enough times. So it is an interesting balancing act, but you are right. You have to build those relationships. You have to with the team. I mean, that's you're going to get a lot more done that way than, like you said, coming in with a lawyer and advocate.
Yeah.
Um, but
But I
it's
mean, those
interest.
are still good
Go ahead.
people to have
For
because, like,
sure.
you're by
Yeah.
yourself. Like, you are
Absolutely.
again, like,
Yes.
there's this great comic of like the parent has an advocate, and then
Yep.
all the other team is on the
Yep.
other side, and the team is
Right.
like, why does Mr. Barth need an advocate?
Yep.
And it's like, you're kind of fighting by yourself.
For sure. And that's kind of was our so the my story about our first like IEP meeting or back to school conference was, I mean, we went to our son, so it was me, his mom, him, go to the kindergarten, bring your book bag with your supplies, talk to the teacher. Okay, I'll see you, next week, 5 minutes in and out. So I go to this one. Well, right after that's my daughter. So what am I expecting? I'm expecting the same thing. I walk in the room, and because of her level of needs, there's like 10 people on the other side of the table. So I'm like, what is going on? Like, I have no idea
Yeah.
why all these people are here. Like, no idea. So yeah, and
Yeah.
it's so crazy. Like he automatically in that situation, it as a parent, you feel like there's a power imbalance. Like it's hard not to. So I mean, it's an
Yeah.
interesting thing, and also like my suggestion for teams is like, I mean, for parents especially that are new to it, like explain more than you think you need to, because for me, I can't in that situation, I can't really participate in the meeting because now I'm caught off guard. So
Yeah.
I'm sitting there like, what's happening? I can't process it. So I'm like, you need to tell me stuff in advance. Or then we'd come to meetings, and you have her evaluation report could be 100 pages. An IEP could be 50 to 75. And
Yeah.
the first meeting is that they bring it and like, we need to go through the evaluation, sign off on it and come up with an IEP. And we got an hour. It's like, hold on a second. Like, I can't even read this document in an
Yeah.
hour. I can't, in order for me to participate, I need to be able to read it at least, come up with questions, and then I can ask. I can't read it and on the fly come up with questions. So as a parent,
Yeah. Oh,
I learned that
you
ask for
definitely
it
need
ahead
to
of
know your
time.
rights.
Yeah. So it's
Like
just
I
go
wrote
ahead.
a summary of the procedural safeguards when I
Okay.
was at my first school. Um, my second school didn't feel like it was legally okay for me to hand it to the parents.
Okay.
But the first school was fine with it. They really liked the resource. But all it was like a one-page handout of like what that packet that they have to offer
Yep.
you every
Yep.
IEP of like these are
Yeah.
your procedural safeguards. And basically, what it's telling you is that, like, this is for you.
Yep.
Like, if you have a problem, you can say no. If
Right.
you don't like
Yep.
something, like, you can sign the IEP right now. And if you go back home and you're like, you know what? I don't think I like this goal or this service. The next day, you can say, I don't like this. I want an amendment IEP. And they
Right.
have to give one to you in like a
Yep.
certain amount of time. Like, the IEP is supposed to be for the parent and the child, yet
Yes.
it like gets all mixed up. And I also was gonna add that getting people to define things, I think really puts them on the spot. And then, like, because like I've had people, I really despise the least restrictive environment when people use that as like, well, the least restrictive environment is a special education classroom. And it's like, no, that's
That's
literally
not
not the
that's
definition
not the
at
definition.
all.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's like just how people use it
Right.
sometimes. So I think it really works to be like, can you actually define that for
Right.
me and like
Yep.
tell me what that is?
What that
And,
means. Right.
pull it up. I don't care. Do whatever you
Right.
want. But when you get people to keep like explaining why they're making such bad
Right.
choices, they'll usually get to a point where they're like, you know what? I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe it's easier for me just to like say
Yeah.
this.
Sure.
I just like to confuse people, I guess.
There you go. So you stated that you work with school teams and with families for inclusion. Like, can you explain a little bit how you work with families to get more
Yeah.
inclusion for their child?
So far with families, it's been more of like just one-on-one coaching or
Sure.
consulting virtually. Um, and it's really trying to give them the support that they need, or just like resources that they may need, um, to just like best support them through the education system. Um, I try to use my knowledge of like, being a teacher and a case manager,
Right,
and
for
like
sure.
seeing how, that legal term, logistic, not logistic. Oh my gosh, I can't remember this word. Um, but just like knowing your rights. And
Right.
I mean, usually when I meet with families and teachers, a lot of times, it feels like just people are really frustrated and they really
Okay.
just want like a sounding board.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so I do ask pretty early if like how direct you want me to be,
Right. That's a good
because
that's a good question.
I I can be very direct,
Yeah,
and I want to make sure that they're like open to a
sure.
very uh like a specific strategy that they should use or
Right.
something.
Yeah, that's great. Let me see. Have you so when you go back to when you were going to college to, become a teacher, did you get taught anything about inclusion during your like when you getting your degree and
Yes.
stuff? Okay.
I was in a phenomenal program
That's
at San
awesome.
Francisco State.
Okay.
Uh, the degree is now called Extensive Support Needs Teaching Credential. Um, a lot of my professors that I had are not there anymore, but I would still say that the program is amazing just because, well, I know some of the new ones and
Okay.
they are like former peers of mine.
Okay.
Um, it was like inclusion was so focused on that when I was a first year teacher, I was shocked that other special ed teachers did not get this information. That I was just like, I thought everyone was getting this information and you don't
Sure.
even know what this means. Like,
Right.
so I was very fortunate to have a program that was so focused on it. And it really just, I mean, it just
Yeah.
became my focus for everything. That I was just like, why am I creating an entirely different curriculum for us by ourselves over here?
Right.
Like, it just makes sense for us to like all be in class with all of our friends.
Right.
And I will support all of you in those classrooms.
So
Um,
so did you pick that
yeah.
program because of the inclusion piece, or that just happened to be in the program you chose for other reasons?
Yeah, my mom basically was just telling, when I was trying to pick my major, my mom was the one that was like, "Oh, well, you want to be a teacher, like just be a liberal studies major." And I was like, "Okay, sure." And then during undergrad, I volunteered with this organization where it was kids with disabilities and it was playing sports with them like on
Okay.
once a week.
Sure. Yep.
And I learned sign language in high school, and so I went to this volunteer thing and I was just like, wow, you guys are signing, like I know sign language.
Ah, cool.
And then I after I did my undergrad, like for liberal studies, I ended up minoring in special education. And I mean, everything just like kept falling together, that I was like,
Hmm.
oh, well, special education, and then you had to choose between like mild, moderate, or extensive support needs. And I think the nurse in me that I did not become, mostly because I did not want to work holidays,
Right.
was like, oh, I'm going to do extensive support needs
Okay.
because like it, I don't know, like if like I don't get squeamish during certain things, or
Sure.
I don't really, I feel like
Yeah.
just part of me thought that
Yeah.
and chose it. And I was living in San Francisco, so I just stayed at San Francisco State, and
Yeah.
just absolutely loved it. And yeah, it's still, I mean, it's been such a huge part of my life forever, and can't stop, won't stop, I guess. It's still
That's awesome.
going.
Still going? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I've given two TEDx talks on inclusion. 10 years ago, I did my first one, and then this year, I did another one, and this year, I did one where part of what I was talking about was how we can use empathy to make the world more inclusive. So, how do you think we can use empathy to be more inclusive?
I absolutely love that topic. I am so focused on doing things with my kids to teach them empathy. Um, And a lot of it, I feel like, makes them inclusive because it makes them think about like what other people might need and like what they could do and like to support them if it needs to
Yeah,
happen. And
for
like
sure.
that, it isn't unfair. We just all need different things to succeed. And so, little ways that I do that is like my kids are 2.5 and 4, so they're
Okay.
very little.
Yep.
They hit a lot because, learning to communicate.
Yep.
But especially after someone gets hurt, like I don't force this apology or get mad right away. It's this like comforting moment. And then it's like, hey, we should ask if they're okay. Like, how did that, how do you think that would feel if this happened? And I don't know if this is like a red flag with me in relationships, but I will like pull other things out. So if like the oldest hits the youngest, or like if okay, actually today the youngest did not want to share the watch that he was wearing,
Sure.
and the older one was very upset, and she just kept telling me how mad she was that she wanted this watch.
Yep.
And I just had to keep reminding her, like, well, yesterday you did not want to share this. And, how do you think that made him feel? Like, maybe we should try practice sharing more, or like just bringing up like past stories of like, oh, do you remember when that happened and how much that hurt your feelings? Like, well, now this is like flipped, like you're on the
Right.
other side of it. How do you think they feel? And
Yep.
it's not supposed to be like making them feel bad, but I feel like that's been our little way of trying to work on empathy. And then we talk a lot about emotions. So if
Sure.
someone's like upset, we're like, they don't have to say no for it to mean no. It'll be
Yeah.
like, oh man, does that sound like they like what you're doing? Like,
Yeah.
look at that body language, look at their facial expressions. And
Sure.
it's already like my 4-year-old had a moment at the park where this little girl came running up, and she was like flapping her hands, and she screamed really loud and had this big smile on her face.
Hmm.
And the scream startled my child, and she kind of turned around and looked at her, and I could see that she was looking at her and like kind of studying what was happening. And then she
Yep.
was like, oh, she screamed, but she looks really happy, huh? And I was like, yeah, she does. And it was like, okay, cool. And then they like parallel played a little bit, and I
Right.
was just like, okay, like it's nice to get those reassuring, like, okay, I think
Yeah.
I'm doing something right.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah. And I think too, just looking, I feel like kids kind of they get the stuff and us adults overcomplicate it. So I mean, kids
Yeah,
don't notice the things that we do or something happens in our as we get older where we just make things more complicated or that kind of thing. Kids are just like, it's a kid, it's cool, whatever. This
yeah.
is interesting. Let me go over and check out because my daughter's in a power chair, so little kids will just come up over to her and like look at it, start climbing on it, and they're just, this is different. I've never seen it. Let me check it out and see what's going on. But you know, they're
Yeah.
that's cool. That's
And it's so
awesome.
much from like leading by example
Yeah,
too.
that's
Like
true.
I think a lot of people just don't realize how much their kids are watching them,
True.
just like all the time. Even if they're like
Yes.
watching TV and you're talking to your partner or something,
Yep.
like both of my kids have just like responded to things sometimes where I'm like, whoa, you're listening still? Like, or you heard me say that? Like, oh my
Right.
gosh, I gotta
Yeah.
stop saying bad words. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Kids are always paying attention. That's for sure.
yeah.
What is one tip that you can share to help our listeners be more inclusive today?
Um, I would say just forever learning, forever educating yourself, and being okay when things change. I know a lot of
Right.
like language changes, and I know like, there's some people who prefer disabled people, and then some people who deserve people with disabilities. And
Right.
there's just a lot of like learning and relearning. Just, I mean, as a parent, as a person, like we're never done learning. So,
Yes.
um, I definitely say that is something I just remind people all the time that like you can always pick up a book by a disabled author and like educate yourself a little bit
For
more.
sure.
Like there's
Yeah.
always a new perspective to hear about.
Yeah.
Um,
That's great.
yeah.
Is there anything that you want to talk about that we haven't discussed today? Any words of wisdom, any good resources, people to follow about inclusion or anything?
Oh my gosh, that's a lot. That's going to be another 30 minutes if I start talking about all of my resources. Um,
or maybe one or two?
oh, so much. Well, I was gonna, so on my website on inclusionstartsnow.com, I do have an inclusive library that is like 100 books of just like all these different types of inclusive books.
Okay,
I
awesome.
want to say all of them have disability representation. There might be one or two that are
Sure.
just like inclusive books in other ways. Um,
Okay.
but that is a great place to start. There are children's books, and then at the very end, there's adult books, fiction and nonfiction, um, and more that I should probably add if I ever get to it. But so there's a lot of great resources
Okay. That's
on
great.
there. But yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to talk to me, and I do like free consult 30-minute things to
Okay.
see if you want to work with me. So
Sure.
got that.
What's the best place to connect with you?
Everywhere. I respond to
Everywhere.
everything way too
Okay.
quickly. I might have a problem with my phone, but it's inclusion starts now is Instagram, TikTok,
All the
YouTube. My
places. Okay.
email is Kayla at inclusionstartsnow.com.
That's
Even though
great.
I also have inclusionstartsnow@gmail.com. So even if you mess up, I'm still
Still,
gonna get
you're
it.
still gonna get it. There you go. Just do all of them. That way you're gonna get it for sure, right? There you
Yeah.
go.
So if
That's
you
great.
ever look for someone called Inclusion Starts Now, it's gonna
There
be
you go.
me.
There you go. I don't have all my stuff the inclusive dad, but I was looking at all of the stuff you sent in for links for the show, and I'm like, that's smart. I just need to go ahead and change all of mine to the same thing, so it's easy to find instead of
Yeah.
like this one's this one's this. That's smart.
I don't even think I think it was more of me just being like, I don't know, am I gonna remember all these different names? No,
That's
like
also a good point. Also a
only
good
I
point.
think Threads wouldn't let me have all those characters. But if
Oh,
like if something won't let me have inclusion starts now, I usually get over it because I'm like, ah, this is too hard.
it's too hard. There you go. Well, I got one more question for you. You ready for the last question?
Yeah. Yes.
Do you like spam? Yes or no?
Um, so like I've had it cooked on things and I feel like it's good. It's fine. Would
That's
I
a
eat it like
yes.
out of that jar? Probably no. I mean, it really God, I feel like the last time I had it, I think I was in Hawaii. I
Yep.
don't eat it a lot, but I'm pretty sure I've had it and it wasn't bad. And I was
Okay.
like, "Oh, that's interesting." But I don't know if I would like go out and buy it and bring it to the house and then me try to cook it.
Gotcha.
But I'm
So
also
you
like that with fish. I'm kind of
that's
a
yeah. Yeah.
interesting eater.
So I'll put that down as a yes. So I'm asking all my guests. The reason I'm asking that is I live in Austin, Minnesota, is where they make spam. So
Oh,
we have the spam museum here, and spam actually is
awesome.
super big in Hawaii. So it makes sense you might have had it in Hawaii because they love it
So
there.
does everyone in Austin, Minnesota love spam?
No,
Or do you get kicked out if you don't like spam?
no. I feel like it's one of those things. So I had spam. We had somebody from out of town with a disability caravan that's driving across the United States. They stopped and actually at the Spam Museum. So we had them over for supper and we fried some up and ate it. And that's the first time I've probably had it since I was a kid. So I mean,
Oh, wow.
I eat it, but I don't eat it a lot. I feel like it's one of those things where I've only been to the Spam Museum a couple times. It's in your hometown, you don't go to it as much kind of thing. But if you're
Yeah.
like out of town, it's kind of cool to see. So I mean, I fry it up. I mean, I've had it cut up and like put in like some pasta salads. But I mean, I'll eat it, but it's not. I don't eat it all the time, but I will eat it. So yeah.
Yeah.
So far,
Yeah. What
so
is
far there's been
spam? I
more.
don't even think I
What
know
is
what it
it?
is.
It's just a lot of pieces of. What is it?
Isn't
You're
it like
asking.
kind of like hot dog? It's like just a bunch of
Yeah,
mixed meat.
yeah. That's a good way to describe it. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Yeah. Originally originally I kind of always thought it was just they came up with it just with the pieces they weren't using for other things. They came up with a product they could sell like yeah, like a hot dog type thing to,
Yeah.
and something that can I mean the shelf life, I don't even know what it is, but it's quite a while. This one we just bought this one a little while ago and it says best by April of 2027, so it's over 3 years on the
Dang.
shelf, so there's a lot of stuff in it. But yeah.
Oh, that's great. I
Yeah.
love that.
Well, thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. To all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Inclusive Dad Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, or review the show. Your feedback helps us connect with more champions of inclusion. Remember to share this podcast with friends and family who might benefit. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.